much. Take your Bibles, if you would, Genesis chapter 20. Genesis chapter 20. I never really intended to preach a series through Genesis, but we've been there. I think this will be our fourth week. And God has just really been giving me just simple things from very famous stories. I want to take you to Genesis chapter 20 and give you 3 points, and we'll go home. And I pray you don't have the Ravens-Steelers game on your mind or whatever heartache that you've been carrying. One thing I'm excited to see, I see families sitting all different places this morning, and I like that. Here's why. I don't want Calvary, nor do you. We ought not want Calvary to become a place of cliques, where you got this group always sitting together and this group always. I like the idea of mingling, and some of you ought to just take that right there and say, oh, maybe I ought to sit somewhere different next week. Meet somebody different. We should be friends with everybody, not just friends with a few. And so let's work on that. Genesis chapter 20 says, and Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur and sojourned in Gerar. Would you look right here? You remember just last week we saw that God judged Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember it? And Abraham, he could see from where he was, he could see the devastation. He saw the smoke. He saw what had happened when he woke up early and he went out and he saw Sodom and Gomorrah were no more. Now, I want you to follow. That's a great thing in his life. Then we get to verse 2. And Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, she is my sister, or of Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Would you look here at me? He just saw that God did what God said he would do. He had just seen God do something great, something outside of man's control. Yet, as he makes his way into Gerar here, he doesn't think that God can protect him from this beautiful wife that he has named Sarah. And so he looks at Sarah and says, we're going to tell everybody you're my sister. And they go in, and to Abimelech he says, she is my sister. Look at verse 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, behold, thou art but a dead man. For the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. Look up here. I'm going to get somewhere with this man. And here's what I don't. Let's not get up and go to the. Nobody is, but let's not get up and go to the restroom. I won't be long. But I think if you'll follow me here, this thought it has helped me so much this week. I'm not kidding you. Every pastor who's called me this week, I've talked to him about this thought. Every counseling appointment I've had this week, I've talked to him about this one thought. Because this right here, it'll help us if you'll follow and stay with me. Look at verse 4. But Abimelech had not come near her. And he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, she is my sister? And even she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. Abimelech said, Lord, hold on. I had no idea. Look at verse number 6. And God said unto him in a dream, yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thine heart. For I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to go touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning. Now, you'd get up early too if God just said, you're going to die, pal. Could you imagine? Here he is sleeping. God comes to him in a dream. By the way, God had came to Abraham personally. He comes to Abimelech in a dream and says, hey, pal, I want to tell you something. That woman that you just took is another man's wife. I'm going to kill you if you don't restore her back to him. Abimelech says, I had no idea. Don't kill me for doing something that's right to do unless you know the truth. And God says, I'm not going to kill you, but I will unless you restore. So he gets up early
Verse 8, in the morning, and called his servants and told all these things in their ears. And the men were sore afraid. Would you listen to that phrase? They were sore afraid. Isn't this a great story? Verse 9, then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, what hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. Abimelech said unto Abraham, what sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? And Abraham said, and here's the title of the message, you ready? Because I thought. Because I thought. Let's pray. Father, fill me with your power. And Lord, this message has helped me, and I pray that it would help your people. In Jesus' name, amen. We have all heard it said that an idle mind is the devil's playground. As I was reading this past week, this phrase jumped out to me as though it were flashing in neon lights. Isn't it so true that we get ourselves in more trouble because we think too much about the things we ought not be thinking about at all? The Apostle Paul must have known about thinking too much, because he wrote in 2 Corinthians 10:5, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. I have said before that there are many times that because we thought, we fan the flame of a fire that was not originally even there. Because of that, we create fires that were never intended to flare up at all. Because I thought, Abraham said. Let's keep reading. Because I thought, surely, verse 11, the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. Number one, if you take notes, number one, because he thought, we find the hasty judgment of others. The hasty judgment of others, because he thought. He said, because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place. But would you go back with me to verse number 6 through 8? And God said unto him in a dream, yea, I know that thou hast didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore. Look down at the verse 8. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told all these things in their ears. And the men were sore afraid. There was a fear of God there. But because Abraham thought, it caused a hasty, judgmental attitude toward Abimelech and those around. And as he makes his way into this city, he looks around and says, oh my, this is a terrible place. Look at these people. Truly, they're not a people that would fear God. So let's tell them you're my sister so I don't die. Do you remember the verse, God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind? Here's what happens when we think. We make hasty judgments of others. Begin walking around saying, well, I don't think they'd want to hear about God, and now somebody may possibly go to hell because I thought. We go and we say, well, I don't like his family, or I don't like her family, husband and wife say about each other, and they say, I just don't like, they don't appear to like me very much, and so because you thought, you never even try. And some today, you sit here this morning and you've got hurt in your past, and you have every reason to feel hurt and to feel maybe that you've been violated, because maybe you have. But let me tell you something, you ought to give God a chance, and the only reason you're not is because you thought. You don't think God can help you. Because I thought, we make some hasty judgments. As Abraham entered into this city, he looked around and he thought. Because of this judgment, he influenced his wife to lie because he thought. Matthew 7:1 states that we are not to judge. It says, judge not, lest ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall also be judged. And the judgment has to do with judging others as though you are better than they are. I'm not telling you don't judge. A spiritual man judgeth all things. There's a time to judge and there's a way to judge. But when we start walking in and we have this holier than thou, and we're better than them, and we start putting our nose up and we start puffing out our chest, you better be careful, because God's going to slap you down. We get thinking way too much, and because I thought, we make hasty judgments of others. Some of you today, you're making a hasty judgment about your mate because you think something's going on. And let me help you. It may be a thought from a past marriage. And because they have done something that reminds you of something that happened back here and you got hurt by it, you're not even going to give them a chance. Why? Because you thought. And some today, maybe you're struggling, you're trying to overcome an addiction, and you say, well, there's just no way. Nobody's going to love me. Nobody will ever accept me back. Let me help you with something. You better stop thinking that way. Some of you are walking around saying, well, it's just too late. There's no hope for my children. And because I thought I'm going to now ruin my children, some need to go to your children and say, hey, I've messed up. I haven't raised you the way God's wanted me to raise you. And if you'll give me another chance, I know you're in your teen years. I know you're a young adult now. But if you'll let me influence you, I'd like a second chance to help influence you for God. And you better stop thinking, because God's more powerful than you're giving him credit for. Abimelech said, Abraham, what in the world? And Abraham said, because I thought. Doesn't thinking get us in trouble? Because I thought. I had somebody several years ago, they left the church, and I went to visit them. I hadn't seen them in like 3 weeks, and I show up and I said, hey, I've been missing you. And they said, well, we know that you preached this message. You preached it right at us. Well, it's true. I'm preaching it right at all of you. And I sat there and I said, whoa, what makes you think that? And they said, well, you said this, and you said this, and you said this, and we know somebody told you that that's what we were going through. I looked and I thought, what are you talking about? Who would come and who would know that? They said, we don't know, Pastor. We have no idea. But here was their problem, because they thought. Because they thought. Can I tell you something? If you feel like the message is for you, it's for you. Let me help you with something. If you feel like the message isn't for you, it's for you. If you walk out and saying, wow, boy, he ripped our face off, put it back on and ripped it off again, stomped on our toes and sent us on our way, it's true. That's what church is for. If you're looking for a place to stroke your back, go to a spa. We begin going through life and we say, well, I want to shy away from truth. And all of a sudden, because we thought, we get all out of balance. And it's like a car going down the road and it just starts to thump and shake a little bit. Why? The alignment's off. Preaching's supposed to realign you. From pastor to people, pulpit to pew, we all need it. Because I thought, Abraham said, and he made a hasty decision. Number 2. Because I thought, we find in verse number 5, said he not unto me, this is Abimelech, to the Lord, she is my sister. And she even herself said, he is my brother. He's pleading for his life, and he's saying, in the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thine heart. For I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Well, as I read this, I began to think, what did he do? Well, if you keep reading the chapter, let's go to verse number 9 and 10. In verses 9 and 10, it says, then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, what hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee? Verse 10, and Abimelech said unto Abraham, what sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? He says, because I thought. And then we begin to look, and yet, verse 12, and yet indeed she is my sister, she is. Abraham begins to give Abimelech an excuse. He begins to try to justify it. And it came, verse 13, to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, and he's, oh, woe is me. I had to wander from Daddy's house. I had every reason to do it. No, you didn't. And Abimelech, verse 14, took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants and gave them unto Abraham and restored him Sarah, his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee. Dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given honor of thy brother and 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of thine eyes, and to all that are with thee, and with all others. Thus she was reproved. And Abraham prayed unto God, and God, here it is, healed Abimelech. How did God keep her, or keep him from going into Sarah? He struck him with a severe illness that was an illness unto death. It was an illness unto death. We look and once again we see, listen out, the sovereignty of God. Can't tell you how many times we've talked about that word in my office. Brother Robinson and I and Brother Scott and Brother McKay, we get to the sovereignty of God. God can do whatever he wants, however he wants, whenever he wants. He's always right. We just got to yield to it. And the reason we don't is because I thought. And because I thought, Abraham said, we see the hasty judgments of others. Then we find not only because Abraham thought the hasty judgment, but we find the heartache that was brought on others. The heartache, a sickness unto death. That verse goes on to say, and his maidservants, verse 17, and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. God caused a severe illness to come on Abimelech, and he closed the wombs of Abimelech's wife. There was no more childbearing during that time. I don't know how long that time was, but I'll tell you what, the power of God is seen in this story. All because Abraham, help me class, thought. All because Abraham thought. Some this morning, well, let me say every once in a while, because a parent thinks that they know more than God, the children suffer. When we think without the mind of Christ, we can bring heartache to those around us. This may not be your intent, but good intentions are not always right actions. You say, well, my intentions were good. Well, your good intentions resulted in something very terrible because I thought. Some of you teenagers today, because you think you know better, you are going to have a life of heartache. And you're going to bring heartache into a marriage. You're going to bring heartache into your children's lives. You're going to bring heartache into your family's life. Why? Because you think right now, and you're not thinking with the mind of Christ. He said, let this mind be in you. Why? So that we might think how Christ would think. Maybe today you have some heartache and you have some hurt in your family. And can I help you with something? Go back. Go back to that decision that may have brought that heartache. And let's start there and get that right. Because I thought. Gets so many of us, all of us at some point in our life have gotten into trouble because we thought without the mind of Christ. And we find the heartache that it brings. Abimelech is fearful of his life. How often does God use circumstances to try and wake us up, to get our mind back on track? That's happened to every one of us. We go through, even in our home, and there are times that we'll walk in and my 3 kids are there, and we'll sit around the dinner table and I'll say, how was school today? And every once in a while, one of them will say, well, I was good, but so-and-so. And they begin to start to talk about somebody else in class that got in trouble. Well, it's not oh, yeah, really? Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, no. I'm not going to let my children learn to shovel dirt about other people. And we'll look, and this is the honest truth, hand on the Bible truth. I'll look at all my children, I'll say, we don't do that at this table. I said, we don't even do that in this house. I said, what somebody else did at school is none of your business. It's none of my business. It's nobody's business but that teacher, that student, and the parents. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And all of a sudden, those type situations just really take the joy out of the air. And then you go to my next child, and I say, how was your day? And they're like scared to death. They don't even want to say they had fun,
I want my children's life to be one of joy. Can I say to you, there can be a lot of heartache in life, can't there? There's a lot of times where we pillow our head at night wondering how we're going to pay the bills. Wondering where the next meal's going to come from. Wondering if this is going on. Wondering if that's going on. And excuse me, I was talking with a pastor this morning, and he called and he said, would you pray with me? I said, I will. He said, this thing's just really been stirred up in my church. And he said, would you pray with me? And I said, I will. He said, but before, will you tell me what you're preaching this morning? He said, I just need something. I said, oh, and I got excited. I said, oh, you're going to like this. This is to a pastor, and I said, you're going to love this. And I said, write it down, man. You want to go preach it, preach it. I said, but man, I'm telling you, this has helped me. And he said, well, you just tell me already. I'm building it up because he was down. And I said, man, I just don't know if you can handle it. He said, Pastor Jim, listen to me. Tell me. And I said, you're probably thinking too much. And he said, oh, yeah. He said, my mind's just racing. And I said, Abraham looked at Abimelech, and I preached this whole message to him a lot faster than I'm doing to you. You probably wish I would have got you on the phone. But I looked at him, and I talked to him on the phone, and I said to him all 3 points. And you could hear him just sniffling on the other end of the line. And I said, preacher, here's the thing. If we're not careful, we get so paranoid up here. We begin to push people away because we feel like we don't even know who our friends are. You've been there, I've been there. And I said, preacher, when you mount that pulpit today, go in with that mind of Christ that you so desire to have. I said, you got a church full of people that love you. You've got buses that went out, and you have Sunday school teachers that are going to show up. And I said, he's just bawling. He said, would you pray? Now together we're crying on the phone. And I started to pray. And then when I got off the phone, I was encouraged. What? That's what the Bible will do. Because I thought. Abraham said, because I thought. We see a hasty judgment of others. Because he thought, we find the heartache that it brings. Sometimes we start gossiping about others and we start spouting off and we start forming alliances. Why? Because we thought we didn't know. We begin to cause some heartache, and now all of a sudden with that came some regret. Because then all of a sudden the truth comes. We're like, oh, I wish I would have never done it. And then there are those that have to practice what Christ did, forgiveness. Because I thought, we find the hasty judgment. Because I thought, we find the heartache. And lastly, in verse 17 and 18 that we just read, so Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech. We find lastly the healing required because Abraham thought. Because Abraham thought. I don't know where you're at. You can close your Bible and look right here at me. Some of you think, close it quick so we can quiet down. All right, stop. Here we go. Look right here. Some of you think that if you start missing Sunday, it might make your marriage better. It won't. Some of you think that if you enroll your kids in all these secular things, it's going to make your relationship with your children better. And it won't. Some of you think. My wife and I went, we have some friends from California, Leslie and her daughter, and their foster kids are with them. And my wife and I got to spend some time at the mall on Friday night as we waited for them to come into Reagan National Airport. And we were there at that mall. That's a huge mall, too. And I was in the American Girl store. I'm not kidding you. That is no place for men. I'm in there and I just start itching. And my wife's looking around and I'm serious about ready to cry. It's like too pink. And then the manager is a dude. It's a guy. And I was trying not to think, because thinking was about to get me in trouble. What dude works at, what? But we were walking through the mall, and we had some time, and so we're just walking, my wife and I. We're looking in stores, and I just couldn't help but see all these teenagers just wandering through. But here's the thing, no smiles. Some of them have their earbuds in. They're just focused on just themselves. Some of them are walking in groups, and you could hear cuss words and different things as they were talking. I began to think of our teenagers. We've got some good teens right here. I got to go visiting yesterday with Cody Cooper, and then met up with Andrew Linder and Adam Linder and Alex. And here I am with 3 teenagers, and Alex is going to be a teen here soon. I'm having a great time. And here's some young men out serving the Lord on a Saturday. Wednesday, you watch them all come, and they fill this choir loft, and you know where they came from teen soul winning, where they're seeing people saved. I began to look at those teens at the mall and our teens, and I thought, why are our teenagers why are they fighting? Is it God's way or this way? Let it be God's way. Teen, you want joy in your heart? Let it be God's way. I didn't see any smiles at the mall. You got to walk into a store and you have a teenager working in the store, and they're just so miserable because work to them is like a punishment. And so I purpose in my heart, I'm going to try and make them laugh by the time I leave. But when I look at this story of Abimelech, we find Abraham had to pray. But because he thought healing was needed, because he thought, parents, if we would just get the mind of Christ, husband and wife, if we would just get the mind of Christ back in our marriage. Grandma and grandpa, you're letting your mind just race, and because you thought you're doing things that they're just going to compound the problem instead of make it better. Let God be God. Let God do what God needs to do. Don't quit. Some are going to quit because you thought. Don't do that. Goodness sakes. We find the healing required because Abraham thought. I spend a lot of hours each week on the phone or in my office. It seems more and more even into the evening time at my house, just talking with people. Some are young people who are hurting today because mom and dad at one time had them in church, then they left church, and the kids, they began to choose the wrong path. Now the kids are taking this thing more serious, and they don't know how. Can God forgive me for all this? Am I really saved? And they need some healing. I'd ask you, start way back here, parents, and just don't leave. Be faithful to God. Even when you don't want to be faithful. There's times where I wake up in the morning and I don't want to read my Bible. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that, but maybe you're a better Christian than I all the time. But sometimes I wake up and think, I love God, but I'm too busy. And if I'm not careful, I'll lose my priority, which is this. And here's what could happen. Somebody could call, and this is the fear I live in. Somebody calling, and they need me to have an answer for them, but I'm not ready to give an answer to any man that asketh thee. And all of a sudden, I could hurt them. I don't want that. So every morning, whether we want to or not, we ought to read our Bible. This morning before church, my phone was ringing. And I took that one call from that pastor, and then after that, I walked over to the chair there, and I always turn the light off because I got people knocking on my outside door all the time when they see the light on. And I got down on my knees, And I begged God that today would be a good day. Did you? Did we do it together? Or did we just wake up late because it's a weekend, so I'm sleeping in a little bit and rush to church and say, all right, we'll be good at church. And then you got in a fight in the car. Why? Probably because you didn't read. You didn't pray. Now you're going to go home. Some need to today before dinner say, hey, hold on. Before we have dinner, I need to say I'm sorry for some things I said. Why? Healing. There may need to be some healing. I don't know where you're at this morning, but we've all gotten ourselves in trouble because I thought. Our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed.